Only mode.
Good afternoon. We're going to get started in about 1 more minute. Well, good afternoon. Let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to the Women's Business Development Center monthly webinar of using growth wheel tools. My name is Karen Goldner, and our topic today is improving cash flow. That's me. I'm the director of the Small Business Development Center here at the Women's Business Development Center in Chicago, and we're glad to see folks on the line. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the WBDC toward the end, but for now what we're going to learn today is how you can identify areas that are harming your cash flow, how you can become more aware of some solutions to work through, and then take the first step in creating a plan to improve that cash flow. A couple of housekeeping things. The first is that if you look on your right side, for most of you, I think it'll be on the right-hand side of your screen, in the GoToWebinar tool, you'll see a label that's called Handouts. There are 4 handouts that are the tools we'll talk about today and an article, and I'll go over those in a minute, but you'll need to download those during the session while the webinar is active. They will not be available after the webinar is over. Just because of our license agreement with Growth Wheel, we're not able to leave those live on our line, or on our online. However, this webinar is being recorded and will be available about tomorrow and then subsequently on our website in our archived webinars if you want to come back and look at it again. So let's, excuse me, start our first poll, because I want to find out a little bit more about you before we get too far. And so if we could have poll 1, please. Yeah, where are you viewing from? If you could please let me know. The Chicago area, outside of Chicago and Illinois, another state, somewhere else, either in the Midwest or some nation beyond the United States. Okay, so it looks like we've got a lot of people from the Chicagoland area, and then someone else from outside the outside of Illinois. So welcome. And at the end of the presentation, to our friend from outside of Illinois, we'll talk about how you can find an SBDC near you. We have a question, and Heidi wants to know, how do you download the webinars? You're not really downloading the webinars, Heidi. What you're doing is you're going into handouts, and then you should just be able to click on those various handouts, and they're PDF files, and you should just be able to then save them to your computer. The website, or the webinar itself will be archived later, and so you can come back and just view it on our website, wbdc.org, in the future, but that obviously it won't be archived until after it's completed. But if you do have questions as we go along, please do feel free to use the question feature on the GoToWebinar tool, and I will answer them either right away, or if I don't answer them right away, it's because I'm going to be covering the material shortly. So we'll make sure that all your questions get answered. Let's do poll number 2 now, if we would please. How did you hear about the webinar? the WBDC is a nonprofit, but our success is judged by your success, and so just like any of your businesses, we like to know how our customers hear about us. So if you could all just let us know that, whether you've heard about it from our website or the newsletter or some other tool. Okay, terrific. Thank you very much for voting. It looks like our website is a source of good information as well as the newsletter and some print media. So terrific. Okay, so let's dive into this. The documents that you'll have in the handouts are listed here. There's an article that you can read later. It's just fairly short and generally pretty. The articles that we have on Growth Wheel are quite user-friendly to read and valuable. And then the tools and the framework that we will be going over as we go through. Again, they do need to be downloaded while you are on the call. So let's just start with the obvious question, which may sound silly, but it's important, I think, to set the stage. So cash flow is how much cash you have and then when you need it to operate your business. It's not the same as profit, and I'm not going to get into a big accounting discussion today, but you can have a profitable business that still has cash flow problems. But there is definitely a relationship, and we'll talk about that toward the end of the presentation today. Cash flow problems are a symptom of something, and part of what we're going to talk about today is how to figure out what they are. It could be a timing problem. It could be growth. It could be poor collections, or your business is simply unprofitable. And I am giving you a link here to our website, and the Online Business Resources provides a nice cash flow template in our Access to Capital section, which you can use. It's just an Excel spreadsheet with some formulas in it that you can use to help identify, well, really to help predict the future is what you're really trying to do. But before we get into more, I want to just do a quick review of Growth Wheel. So as you may recall, Growth Wheel is a tool based on the 4 quadrants of the circle that all businesses need to worry about. And then within each quadrant, you have focus areas that are that each business needs to worry about. And this one, we are focusing on financials, obviously, which is in the operations quadrant. So let's go to polls 3 and 4. And if we could open up poll 3, I'd like to find out how long you've been in business, please. Growth Wheel is a great tool, set of tools, because it does really work with businesses at all stages. But it's helpful for me to know, for purposes of this discussion, how long you've been in business. Great. So we have some people who are in the planning stage, and then also people who are 1 to 3 years in business and who have been around for more than 3 years. So that's a nice spread. I do want to remind people, because we've had some new folks join us, welcome. The handouts, which are the tools that we'll be talking about today, are in your handout bar on the GoToWebinar toolbar that you have on the right-hand side of your screen. Probably it's on the right-hand side of your screen. And if you click on the little handouts, the plus sign next to that, you'll see 4 documents that are all PDF documents. And you just click on those and save them to your computer, and they'll download, and then you'll have them for after the webinar is over. When the webinar is completed, these handouts will no longer be available. So please make sure to download them during the webinar today. And then let's do poll number 4, just to find out if you've worked with a Small Business Development Center before. So if we could have poll 4, thank you. And if you could just let us know if you've worked with us, with another Illinois Small Business Development Center, or for our friend from out of state, if you have worked with SBDCs in your states. Great. So it looks like a number of you have worked with us, and I definitely recognize some names. And then some people have not worked with anybody yet, and so we'll talk about how you can access the Small Business Development Center network to help your business grow when we get to the end of the presentation. Okay, so we're going to be in the financials, and I want to remind everybody again also, and we'll talk this through, that every growth wheel tool has a structure. So we're going to start with cash management, which seems like a logical one for today. There is a title and benefit. There is an intention, which is really the goal of this particular tool. There's a process that you can use to use the tool. There's next steps. And then there's the space for letting you actually focus on your ideas and work through the details. And then at the bottom, there's a place to date and own it, which isn't showing up here because it doesn't fit on the page right. But just take my word for it. It's at the very bottom. And sometimes dating it can be helpful when you go back then and sort of see where you're at. So I want to point out a few things here. This is really just an overall list of most of the ways that you could possibly improve cash flow. And so for your business, many of these may not be possible or good ideas, or they may be things that you're already doing. But the purpose of the list is to help you identify, one or two that might be valuable. So there's the things that you do with your debtors or customers, the people who owe you money. You can shorten terms of payment. You can convert to more email invoicing, which we'll talk about more in a minute. Have people pay you in advance, or perhaps in some industries, it's common to have a down payment and then progress payments as things go along. You can charge interest on overdue receivables, and you can also offer cash discount for immediate payments. A lot of doctor's offices, for instance, just require you to pay your copay, for instance, at the time of service. One of the things that those kinds of changes can do not only helps you get your cash quicker, but it also can reduce your billing expenses. Then what about with your creditors? And this can be a variety of creditors. It could be your suppliers, right? So if you can get better terms from them, if you're having to pay your suppliers within 7 days and your customers are paying you within 30 days, obviously you're going to have a problem. You may need to be able to have some kind of installment agreement. If for some reason you've ended up in a situation where you owe your suppliers a large amount of money, you may be able to negotiate some kind of payment plan with them. And then there's inventory. Maybe you have too much inventory. That's one of the things that in some businesses isn't an issue at all, but in some businesses can be. So that's something to think through, and we'll talk about that more in a little bit. And so part of the inventory issue may be to order in smaller quantities. Even if that costs you a little bit more per unit, sometimes that's the better approach. You also may have assets that you could sell. I'm not talking about sort of selling the seed corn here, but if you, what sometimes happens is a business may find it more productive to lease their real estate rather than own it, for instance. You then may also look at needing to get some kind of loan, whether that's line of credit, and we'll talk more about those things in a minute. And then raising capital, either having your suppliers lend you money or else getting investor capital. And honestly, the investor capital option is really only, from a practical point of view, available to a relatively small number of companies. Investors are taking large risks with you because they don't get a guaranteed interest rate or any kind of security interest in your business other than just ownership of it. but they don't, if the business fails, essentially their security is gone. And so they want a very high rate of return, and that means your business is going to have to be able to grow or scale very significantly. And therefore, you know, for most of the small businesses we work with here at the SBDC, it's really not an option. So you can kind of go through this list on your own. Again, you'll have downloaded this tool, and you can use it at your leisure later, and just identify. You know, there may be some of these that are more useful than others. Some may not make any sense at all. But things to kind of think through, and then you can start to develop a plan for how to carry those things out. Here's a few other suggestions. Some of them actually I picked up from QuickBooks, who has a lot of data on these sorts of things. So, you know, we talked about collecting payment at point of sale, accepting credit cards and PayPal if you don't already, if you're selling, even if you're selling both online and virtually, but allowing credit card payments is a good way to get things, your cash sped up. Again, we talked about the down payment with an order or progress payments, but the email invoice is something that I found this to be kind of interesting actually when I learned it, that what, you know, the people who study these sorts of things and look at large amounts of data say that you should actually, if you're emailing an invoice, you should put the invoice information, you know, the amount due and remittance information and all that in the email itself, not as an attachment. And you do that for a couple of reasons. One is that there are some email servers and so forth that tend to just strip attachments or mark it as spam, but it also just seems to work better that people will see it and they won't think, oh, I don't have time to open the attachment, so I'll look at it later, and then they forget to. The other thing that was recommended is that you want to make your terms, if you have the flexibility to do that, you want to make your terms 7 days. So if you send out an email and say payment is due now, then by definition the payment is really kind of past due. The person's already late, so why pay right away? Because, well, a day late and a week late and a month late, what the heck, from their perspective. If you say that it's due in 15 days or 30 days, that's a long time from now, and so it just doesn't have any urgency to it. But if you say, you know, pay in 7 days, then for smaller organizations where somebody's actually making a decision when to pay you, then 7 days seems to be the optimal time to help move your payments along. Let's look at another tool, which is some financing options. Okay, so I want to talk about sources and uses here. So a source of funds is where you're getting the money from, obviously, and a use of funds is where it's going. And you want the timing of sources and uses to match. So if you have customers, as I said before, who are paying in 30 days and suppliers who need you to pay in 7 days, all of a sudden you're going to have a problem, right? So the first thing to try to do is see if you can change that, get your customers to speed up and get your suppliers to agree to longer terms, but that may not be possible. So then typically the appropriate vehicle is some kind of financing. And you can get either bank financing, like a term loan or a line of credit. If you're in the Chicago area, the Women's Business Development Center makes working capital loans to businesses that are in business. And you can just go to our website, wbdc.org, and go into our Access to Capital section and find out more about that. You also may be able to get your clients or your customers to essentially finance you by making progress payments on long-term projects or paying a deposit when they order. Also then supplier financing, and so this generally requires that you've established a good track record with them, but once you have, ask to negotiate better payment terms with them. So rather than, you know, collect on delivery or payment in advance, see if you can get a week's, you know, 7-day terms or 15-day terms or optimally 30-day terms. so that you just have to pay them within a month. And many suppliers, after you've established a good payment relationship with them, will allow you to do that. Almost none of them will offer it, though, so you'll need to typically ask. And then again, investor financing is really appropriate when you're looking at explosive growth opportunities. So for most kinds of businesses, that's not an option. But you'll see in this in the tool, there's all kinds of different types of financing. Oops, sorry. There we go. And I want to talk just briefly about factoring a little bit. So factoring is selling your receivables. So you have customers who owe you money, and they owe you money based on purchase orders and other legal documents, as opposed to just you haven't been able to collect yet. And so maybe they owe you money in 30 days or 60 days, but again, you have payroll due this week, right? So you sell your receivables to a factor who, for a fee, will give you most of the receivable amount and then collect the rest, and typically they keep the rest, or they keep most of the rest. So factoring can be a good vehicle sometimes. It is easy to get trapped into a cycle with a factor, though, because what you're doing is giving up a fairly significant amount of your margin, and that may be all or some of your profit. So the best way to avoid dealing with a factor, or with the what we see a lot more now are these merchant cash advance companies, is to try and do the best you can to plan ahead, to use the cash flow template that you can get from our website, or some other way of looking at your monthly cash flow, projecting that out so you can see, oh my gosh, in 6 months I'm going to have to order a bunch more inventory, and I need to make sure that I have enough cash for that. Oops, it doesn't look like I'm going to, so now I need to figure out how I'm going to finance it. It gives me a little time maybe to work on getting a loan for that or something else, and it prevents an emergency from happening. I do want to give a little public service announcement about merchant cash advance companies. Most small business people are used to dealing with loans and debt and credit on the consumer side, where there are lots of regulations to protect consumers. And they're not perfect by any means, but there's a lot of regulations. There are no regulations for loaning money to small businesses, and people don't understand that. The only thing that is controlling what a lender can do to your small business, frankly, is what you give the lender in exchange for the money. And so there are these organizations now that will give you money right away, I mean in a day or two, and the application is very quick, and they really don't care about your credit because all they want is access to your bank account. And as long as you have customers making you payments on a regular basis, and therefore you have cash going through your account, whether you have any kind of profit or whether you need that cash for other purposes, they don't care, because they'll do a sweep of your bank account as frequently as every day if they want to. And you'll end up paying very exorbitant interest rates and completely losing control, essentially, of your ability to manage your business. So don't do that. Those organizations really, those companies are driven by two things, allow them to work. One is that people don't know any better, or they assume that somebody's protecting them, when in fact that's not the case. And the other is you have people who are in desperate need of money, either for, I guess I would call them good reasons, like you had this opportunity for a big sale drop into your lap that you hadn't been able to plan for, or that they've not been able to plan or not made plans, and therefore end up in what I would call a bad cash flow situation, which is not due to an opportunity, but simply due to low profits or adverse circumstances. So really be careful when someone gives you a shiny little piece of paper or email and says, we can get this approved for you in a day. and all we need is to essentially find out what kind of bank activity you have, because they're counting on that money being in your account long enough for them to sweep it and take it. So that leads us to an unfortunate thing to have to talk about, because sometimes your cash flow problem isn't a timing issue, it's just profit, right? And this is not the happy thing to work on, but you know, brutal honesty is the only way to run a business, right? So maybe your prices are too low. So first of all, are they covering your direct costs, which, you know, for most business people that's pretty easy to figure out, but are they covering your overhead costs as well? And then how do they compare to your competitors? So there's typically an upper end that you are not able to charge beyond because your competitors are charging, you know, X, and you can't charge twice X in order to keep your customers happy. And then that leads into volume maybe too low. So maybe your prices are correct, but you just need to sell more. You know, right? It's easier said than done. And the WBDC has some good resources. We've got some online on-demand classes, and the link is here on a variety of things that you'll see on this site if you go to it. And I would encourage you to just jot it down and meander over there afterwards. Online on-demand classes that are free for you, and they're on a variety of topics, but some of them are on sales planning and how you can kind of get your sales efforts organized. And then lastly, perhaps your costs may simply be too high. This is a, you know, really insultingly oversimplified discussion of profitability, and I understand that. We've done some growth wheel webinars on pricing and also on marketing and sales, which you can find on that link as well. And it may be that's the kind of thing that an advisor may be able to help you look at in more detail in your specific situation. Growth Wheels also has a tool. Again, this is a tool that you will be able to download during the webinar. I'm going to remind you again to please go to the handouts section on the GoToWebinar tool and download the handouts during this webinar. They will not be available after the webinar. But what this really does is just give you a list of you know, how to increase profit. Again, this is not magical or even particularly insightful, but it's designed to help you sometimes take a step back from the day-to-day details that you're you know, up to your eyeballs and alligators, right? And this can help perhaps be just kind of that step back tool. So, you know, you can increase sales from existing clients, you can generate new clients, you can get more from products that you're selling in terms of additional products and services that accompany those products. You can raise prices on your sales, you can reduce costs by reducing the prices that you're paying, and sometimes you can negotiate those kinds of terms with your vendors once you have some experience with them. You can stop doing certain things to eliminate those costs, and then increasing productivity, which often happens as you grow, can then help also reduce your costs. So by being more efficient. So this can be kind of a list of steps that you can brainstorm either with an advisor or just on your own that may help you identify some ideas. I would encourage you, if you're looking at this, to not dismiss any of them. Make yourself write down at least one specific idea that would apply to each of these. Now, they may end up being bad ideas that you can't do, but make yourself do that, because it's amazing how often you can generate a new good idea when you make yourself do something a little uncomfortable. Okay, so let's do poll number 5 and 6 right now, because I'm kind of curious, because there's been a lot of material here, and I also want to remind you to please ask questions. You can do that by just typing into the questions bar on your GoToWebinar toolbar. But I'm interested in finding out if people are planning to use this tool, how, if you want to use it with an WBDC or SBDC advisor, or come to a future webinar, or all of the above, or some other combination. It looks like people are going to be using these tools. We're going to keep the voting open for just another couple minutes because I'd like to hear from everybody. I am in Chicago here, where we like to vote early and often, so please share your view. And it does look like people are going to be using these tools in the future, which is great. I will remind you again to please download the tools during the webinar. They will not be available after the webinar. And if you have questions, go ahead and type them in. We've got a few more slides, but they're kind of wrap-up slides. So now is the opportunity to start asking your questions. And then Eleni will close up this poll and then go to the last poll here, which asks you some seemingly random questions, but I will tell you why we're interested in the information. So poll number 6, please. I want to find out if there are any military veterans, childcare business people, or any established businesses in Aurora or the western suburbs of the Chicagoland area. The reason we ask is that we do have a special Veteran Business Outreach Center here at the WBDC to provide services to our veterans who are looking to open or grow businesses. We provide a lot of child care business advising and workshops here, and we also have a scale-up program which helps existing businesses who are in the Aurora, Illinois area. So, okay, you go ahead and close the poll, please. It looks like no one is in those categories, but if you know of anybody who is, just send them our way. So we're going to talk briefly about how you can, what you can do next, right? Well, you've got all these tools because you've downloaded them, right? And you can work through them on your own. And as you know, if you downloaded them, they're interactive PDFs, so you can either print them out and play with them on paper if you prefer, or you can play with them just on your computer. You can save them and use them over time, you know, anything like that. You could also make an appointment to see either myself, I'm Karen Goldner, or Meg Herman. We're your two Certified Growth Wheel advisors at the WBDC if you're in the Chicago area. So if you're having trouble with the PDFs, what you want to do is just click on them. That should open them, and then you should be able to save them. So that's the best way to do that is, Marlo, is to just go ahead and open the document, you know, just click on it and then save it. We have a question from Linda. Yes, our services are available, and I should have said this at the beginning, to both men and women, whether they're veterans or not. We do provide services without discrimination. Our mission is the economic empowerment of women through entrepreneurship, but we have a number of clients who are men, and we like them all very much too. So if you're outside of Chicago, which we have a couple people who are, the Small Business Development Center network is a nationwide network. So there are a number of SBDCs in Illinois, but then also in all 50 states. If you want to go to sba.gov at some point and just type in your state, you can find the nearest Small Business Development Center. And the Growth Wheel tool is used by many small business development centers. All of them in Illinois. We all have certified Growth Wheel advisors. But then even outside of Illinois in many states, not all but many. So if you want, you can also then schedule an appointment with an SBDC advisor. And you can use these tools, but there are lots and lots of other tools. If you remember back to the Growth Wheel itself, there's 20 areas of focus, and in fact I didn't even use all of the financing tools in the webinar today. So there's lots of tools that can help you work through the issues that are important and challenging for you at any given point. You can look to growthwheel.com and get a little bit of a sense of the types of topics. So if you are wanting to set up an appointment, and our advising is always free. It is provided at no cost to you because we are taxpayer funded, so thank you very much. And that is true of all small business development centers. We can meet in person or by phone. We do have an intake form that we need to ask you to fill out so that we have the pertinent information to be able to help you. And then, you know, you get about an hour, 45 minutes to an hour to talk with an advisor. And using the Growth Wheel tools in advance can help you focus that discussion. But even if you have some other issue, a general marketing problem or an employee issue or something like that, knowing what that issue is when you come in can help really help drive the discussion more effectively for you. So here is our phone number. If you're in Illinois and certainly in the Chicagoland area, we'd love to work with you. And you can either meet with myself or Meg Herman. We both work with companies using Growth Wheel. And then I'm giving you our online business resources again, that website there. So please do copy that down. In the Access to Capital section of that page, you'll see some templates. So we're getting ready to kind of close up here. And so what I want to do is see if there are any last questions. Okay, so how can you tell if you're profitable versus if it's a cash flow situation, right? So the best way to do that is to look at a monthly cash flow projection. So put together your revenue for each month, and this can either be historic or it can be a projection, and then what your expenses are. And essentially, if you are always running out of cash, then you might very well be in an unprofitable situation. If the cash flow issue just happens occasionally, then it's probably more likely to be a timing issue. So does anybody have any more questions? I want to also let people know that we've got some other Growth Wheel webinars coming up in March. We have one on how to get free media attention that I'm doing, and then we have one that Meg Herman will be doing on outsourcing. So both kind of operational issues and also external public relations and sales issues. So one person has then asked a question. I'm a professional coach and currently I'm taking money from my personal accounts. Right, that's also a sign that you are likely to be unprofitable if you're having to do that on a regular basis. So at that point, what I would recommend is that you look at your pricing and the number of hours of service you're providing. One of the things that happens a lot in professional services like that, where nearly all of the expense is your labor, is you are undercharging even based on the market because you want to get started and you feel like, okay, if everybody else is charging $100 an hour for this service, if I charge $50, then I can get more clients. The problem is that you end up then simply not making enough money. I mean, at that point, you just you're unprofitable, even though you don't have a lot of expenses, because you still have some, and you're probably not working or not billing at least for 50 or 60 hours a week. Any other questions? And this is a great time also to download the tools. And to our person who just asked about that, the coach, there's some pricing tools in Growth Wheel which you might find helpful. So if you want to follow up with me, I know that you have my email address. Well, actually, yes, I know you have my email address, so we can chat more about your specific situation. But anyway, now is a good time if you have not downloaded those tools, and I know that you're all sick of hearing me, but there's always someone who forgets to. Please download all of them because we'll leave the webinar open for a while so that you have another few minutes to do that, because it does take a few minutes with four tools. But hopefully you will find them valuable. And any other questions? Okay, again, thank you very much. Eleni, let's leave this open for just a few minutes so that folks can finish downloading the tools. And hope that everybody has a great rest of their day, and look forward to meeting those of you I've not met in person sometime. Thank you very much.